Thank you so much for joining us. I will go ahead and get started. I know y'all have had a long day. My name is Laura Fenn. I'm the creator and founder of the Walking Classroom. So thank you for taking a few minutes of your time to learn more about the program. By the end of the presentation, you'll understand what the Walking Classroom is, the research behind the program, the content, the structure of the program. We've got a lot of resources to supplement it. I'll show you some of those, as well as giving you some ideas for summertime learning, hybrid learning, after school learning, as well as regular classroom learning. And again, at any time, if you have any questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat. Okay, let's get started. So there I am, 7-year-old kid on the south side of Chicago. Latchkey kid, grew up unattended, left for hours. And I loved school. We had recess 3 times a day. And I recently realized that the reason we probably had recess 3 times a day was so that the teachers could go out and have a smoke, but no longer doing that, thankfully. But the downside is that the kids really don't get a whole lot of recess. But the bottom line is I loved school. And I loved school so much that I grew up and I became a teacher. And part of the tradition of my teaching, whether I started teaching in East Harlem, New York, and then I moved to the suburbs of New Jersey, and then I taught in some rural areas, North Carolina, and I taught in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where we are now. And regardless of the environment where I taught, whether it was inner city or more rural or suburban, I had a tradition, and that was that I would play kickball with my kids every Friday afternoon. And the deal was, as long as they got all their work done, we would, save Friday afternoon for some kickball time. And shockingly, they always got all their work done. And it was just a really great way to build community, to have some fun, for those kids to, who didn't necessarily excel in the classroom, to excel on the kickball field. And it was just something that we looked forward to. And, like I said, it was a tradition that I had from day one with my teaching, until it wasn't. And this is an actual picture from my North Carolina classroom. And my kids were not always that miserable. That's actually a picture of them right before a field trip. And I was scolding them that they needed to behave. But you get the idea. The kids spend so much time sitting. And we were, PE and recess time was getting cut. And it got so bad that our administration started counting the minutes, because we had a 120-minute mandate of physical activity per week. But that time for physical activity was being cut and replaced with classroom instruction. So what they did to sort of fulfill all of those requirements is they started counting the time that the kids would walk from the classroom to the lunchroom, or from the classroom to, art class, or from the classroom down to the bus after school. They started counting that as physical activity in order to meet the mandate. And it was just heartbreaking, because the kids were spending so much time inside. And, they were just grumpy, and on the days when we had PE, we wouldn't have recess. And sometimes on the days when we had recess, some of those kids, were held back by, for remediation in other academic areas. And so, sometimes these kids would. We're going to mute that person. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. But sometimes these kids would get no fresh air. They'd take the bus, they'd get to school, they'd be inside all day, no PE, no recess. They'd take the bus, they'd go home. And sometimes it wasn't safe for them to play outside after school. Mom and dad were at work. And so they were inside the entire day. So anyway, one day I had a particularly bad day, and I came home and I was just so upset and I was so grumpy. And I went for a walk. And so while I was walking, I wasn't listening to some energetic, happy, change my mood sort of music. I was actually listening to a podcast about whether Betsy Ross, created the first American flag or not. And so as I was walking, my mood was improving. I was getting some fresh air and exercise. I I was learning something. I was just happy. I was happier certainly than I had been when I had left the house 5 minutes prior. And so as teachers, as health professionals, as after school facilitators, you know that you never turn that off, right? You're always trying to help your students. You're always trying to engage them and make things better for them. So while I was walking, I was like, well, my kids could do this. My kids could go walk and listen to something and learn something. And so I went home and I started looking for educational podcasts that were appropriate for fifth grade students, and I found nothing. And so I started creating my own. And so I literally just, hooked up my computer and I started talking and recording these lessons that I would have taught to my students while they were sitting down. And, different things about different lessons that I had coming up the next week. And I went to Walmart and I got a bunch of cheap MP3 players. And I loaded up this playlist of these podcasts that I had recorded myself. And so I approached my principal with it and I said, hey, I've got this great idea. I know we're not allowed to go outside and I know that we're not allowed to, have fun outside. But I've got this idea. It's still me teaching. It's still lessons that are related to the curriculum that I would have been teaching. But instead of sitting in the classroom, we're going to go outside and the kids are going to listen to these podcasts that I created. It's still class time. It's still learning, and I was trying to go on and on. And she stopped me right there. And she's like, you know what? I just announced my retirement. I don't care what you do. And only because she now had the freedom to let the teachers do what they knew what was best for the students was I able to introduce this program to my kids. And as you might imagine, my kids loved it. So, what would have been taught like this was now being taught like this. And so my kids, they were up and they were walking and they were getting some fresh air and exercise. And my whole intention had been just to get the kids out. I didn't even think that they would really learn anything. I just had to include the education piece to sort of sell the program. I just wanted them to get some fresh air and some movement. But it was the most wonderful thing because we would get back to class and I would say to my kids, I'm like, so what'd you learn? And the walk was maybe like 15, 20 minutes long, just sort of this lesson that I had recorded off the cuff. And, my smart kids, my strong readers, the kids who always did all their homework, they weren't necessarily the best listeners. And so they didn't really get a whole lot from the podcast. They enjoyed the time outside, but it was my ADHD kids. It was my dyslexic kids. It was my kids who had autism. It was my kids who were not the strongest readers for whatever reason. They were the ones who were raising their hands. They were the ones who were answering the questions about what the podcast was about, what they had learned. They were the ones making the connections. And it was this wonderful realization that, I always knew these kids were smart, but they didn't know that they were smart. And certainly the other smart kids in the class never knew that these kids were smart. It's just that their learning style had not been tapped into. And so to get the opportunity to experience learning in a completely different way and to feel smart for the first time when you're in fifth grade was super, super powerful. And so, these kids, they started to sit up a little straighter and they started to engage more and they started to really, build their confidence, not just when we were walking, but in other academic areas, because like I said, they sort of felt, smart for the first time. And so, after a while, these kids, I laugh and I say all the time that they became like puppy dogs, like, can we go for a walk? Can we go for a walk? And, they just thought that they were getting out of doing work. They really didn't realize how much they were benefiting. Yes, they were getting outside. They weren't getting out of doing work, but they were getting outside. They were getting some fresh air. They were getting some exercise. But when they came back, their brains were oxygenated. They had learned so much. I was shocked how much that they retained. And they were just enthusiastic about learning and just, really just sharing with others. And this whole different style of learning was just so, so, so powerful. So this is I think a wonderfully illustrative graphic. And, just 20 minutes of walking just lights up the brain so much. And so, your energetic kids, they sort of calm down, they get their squirrels out, and you're like, soggy, lethargic kids, they wake up with this walk. And so it's a really great sort of equalizer, but it gets the blood flowing. It gets that fresh oxygen to the brain. So not only are the kids learning while they're walking, but they are really primed to learn even more once they get back to the classroom, and they're happier. We actually had the opportunity to work with University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill a few years ago, and they did a program evaluation of the walking classroom. And it really just, validated what teachers had been telling us for years. And that's that walking improves student learning and retention, both short-term and long-term. And then it just made kids happy. They were just so happy to get out of the classroom. Like I said, they don't even realize how much they're benefiting. They just think it's fun. And so they make this positive association between walking and learning. And, this is hopefully a lifetime, habit that stays with them. I talked a little bit about how, walking while learning really does engage different learning styles. And it's really just a wonderful way to scaffold that education to really help, decrease the achievement gap. So, whether a child is a visual learner or an auditory learner, or, they do better in a traditional reading, writing, or kinesthetic, this is just another way to sort of build the foundation so that, build some background knowledge for the kids, so that when they do sit down and when they do read actual text, they do have a lot more background knowledge to help sort of fill in those gaps. It's a very easy, approachable way to access that information. Another interesting point is that by the time kids, especially girls, get to middle school, and if they start if they start menstruating, their likelihood to exercise really, really decreases. The last thing a girl, or really any middle schooler, but girls in particular, they do not want to be the center of attention. They do not want to be in gym class and have everybody watching them like try to do a layup or try to do the crab walk across the floor, or whatever the case may be. But walking is a really approachable exercise. And so, if the kids aren't so healthy, if they're overweight and they're not getting a whole lot of exercise, walking provides a really easy entry point just to sort of get them into the habit, really build those, lifestyle habits to hopefully carry them through. And it's very approachable. They can be successful at it. Our researchers, they did this quantitative research, but then they also did this qualitative, and they asked the students how they felt after they did the walking classroom and while they were doing the walking classroom. And they felt smart and happy and healthy and strong and energized. And teachers also report higher attendance rate on walking classroom days. So that's a group of kids post-walk. I mean, who wouldn't want that? Look at that, right? They're like just so happy. And the walks are about 15, 20 minutes long, but it's really just the break that the kids need to sort of press the reset button and, bring some of that joy back to learning. So there's a picture of the program in action. The basic idea is that the kids listen to the same podcast at the same time, and they walk while they're doing it. So we'll talk a little bit more. There's more of like an in-depth online training that sort of talks about classroom management. But the audio devices, you can share them among classrooms. If you have an after-school program with 90 kids, you don't need 90 audio devices. You can get 30 audio devices and you can share them among the three groups. We actually have a large district in Illinois that is getting a Walk It audio device for all of their kids for their summertime learning. And so as part of the ESSER funding, they're using those funds to help supplement the learning so that these kids can walk with their family. So the program is very flexible. There's lots of different ways to use it. And I will show you this quick video of the program in action.
It all starts with a few simple steps. an MP3 player with a social studies lesson via podcast, and you've got the walking classroom.
It's been really fun because we get to get out of the classroom and learn stuff that we haven't really learned.
With budgets being cut, very often students only get PE, once, maybe twice a week.
And so former teacher Laura Finn knew there was something more that could be done. Why not combine what students learn in the classroom with exercise?
You walk, but instead of sitting in a classroom, your brain gets more air and it helps you learn.
When we're inside the classroom, we have to sit there all day and do work. But when we go outside, we have fresh air and have energy to play.
Just to give you an idea of how successful this program is, researchers at Elon University started tracking the students' test scores before and after they started the program. In just 10 weeks, their scores shot up.
My kids have seen really good test scores. Yeah, social studies in particular, they've done really well because they listen to me, but they don't always listen to me the best. And when they get to hear it from another perspective.
By getting the students walking every day during school, we're trying to get them to establish healthy lifestyle habits early that they can carry forward with them as they grow older.
Good job. Good job.
In Alamance County, Meg Smith, News 14, Carolina.
Okay. And I always laugh because in that picture, those teachers are waving and cheering the kids on, but that's because it was 5,000 degrees in North Carolina that day and they didn't want to be sweaty for the cameras. But we certainly do encourage the teachers to walk with the students, the teachers, the facilitators. Y'all need, a chance to get out and stretch your legs and get some fresh air too. So it's a great break for you. I actually had another teacher from that same school that the news cast came from. And that teacher, she was in Weight Watchers and she actually used the walking classroom to help her log more steps. And over the course of the school year, she ended up losing 20 pounds. And she attributed a lot of the success of that to regularly getting out during the school day. So we were super happy for her. Separately, what do the kids listen to while they walk? Well, they've got a lot to choose from. There are 167 podcasts that come preloaded on these audio devices. So the audio device, it's about the size of a deck of cards, and it's manufactured by Playaway. You might be familiar with these audio devices from your school libraries or sometimes the public libraries. So it's just our custom content that's loaded on there. There's no Wi-Fi, no data needed, no uploading or anything. The most off-task things that kids can do is listen to the wrong educational podcast. But anyway, they're super, super simple to use. The hardest part is figuring out how to get the lanyard on, not figuring out, just actually doing it. But anyway, so each podcast begins with, like I said, most podcasts are about 15 minutes long. Each podcast begins with a health literacy message, and then it pivots to the main content. And then there's a lesson plan that supports all of the podcasts. And within that lesson plan, there are some social emotional learning, some character value, deeper dives. So for this one, for example, this podcast is about physical versus political maps, and the health literacy message is personal space. And then the character value is reliability. And so the podcast usually starts with like 2 or 3, with 2 students and their teacher. They're out for a walk. And so the one kid might be like, dude, back up, you're too close. And then the other child's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. And then the teacher pops in and she's like, oh, you need to be aware of personal space. And, there are some kids like to, they're more comfortable being close. Other kids need a little bit more space. So then they talk about that and why it's important to respect those boundaries. But then they talk about like, not just among people, but also among other cultures and how, different ideas of personal space. And so then that pivots, speaking of personal space, remember last week when we were talking about maps, and then they talk about physical versus political maps and what the difference is among those and how you can tell and things like that. And then in the lesson plan, in the teacher's guide, the idea of reliability comes up. And so obviously it's important for maps to be reliable. Why is it important for people to be reliable? So for every podcast, there's a health literacy message that starts it. So we've got hygiene and, wearing appropriate clothing, hydration, vitamins, sunscreen, and then the character values from, being trustworthy and humble and having patience and wisdom and creativity. So all of those things. So not only are, different learning styles engaged, but the kids are building their health literacy so that when and while they're walking, they're obviously getting healthier. But it's all of these things that sort of build up cumulatively and really lead toward a healthy lifestyle habit long-term. So the podcasts themselves are really targeted for grades 3 through 8. It's the same program. So if you have, a student in 4th grade, and then, you have an after-school program that goes 4th grade through 8th grade, that walking classroom, it's flexible and it can be used with all of those different age levels. So if a child in 4th grade, if they're learning about the Revolutionary War for the first time, and let's say the topic is like the Boston Massacre, they learn about that. And then the curriculum spirals around, and then they hit on the Revolutionary War again when they're in 8th grade. And so if they listen to that same podcast again when they're in 8th grade, they have a deeper understanding. They understand more of the names. They understand more of the causes and effects. And I equate it to if you watch a Disney movie with younger kids, you both laugh at the same things, but for different reasons. And so the same thing is with the walking classroom. It's a very flexible program. It can be used with lots of different age ranges. And again, social emotional learning is woven throughout. The lesson plans that we talked about. So each lesson plan will have some vocabulary. And so you can review that vocabulary before the walk, just so that the students will become familiar with it. Then there's a few building background suggested questions. And then at the end of the podcast, when you get back, there's always questions for thought and discussion. And the first 2 questions are going to be related to the podcast itself, just, some general understandings. And then that 3rd question for every podcast in the lesson plan is always going to be about the character value. So this one with hot springs and geysers, it's connecting, hot springs and geysers to communication styles. And so hot springs are gradual and peaceful, and geysers are dramatic and forceful. They're both different. They're both beautiful. And then it talks about communication styles and why is it important to be able to recognize when, the appropriateness of different communication styles, why both styles of communication are important, but when, you need to be aware of when and how to use different communication styles. There's also a comprehension quiz for each podcast. Again, it goes from basic recall to higher level thinking skills. The bottom couple questions will be like sequencing and inferencing, main idea. And then the last 2 questions will always be health related, again, reinforcing those health literacy ideas. So, it's not heavy handed. These health literacy messages are so valuable. We get feedback so often from students. I remember one child in particular, he wrote us a letter and he said, I never knew what a calorie was. And he said, both my parents are really big. And so now when we go to McDonald's, I order apples instead of French fries. And, just that small change. And a lot of times, students don't have control over where they go to eat. But if they have more awareness, if they have choices, they can choose water instead of soda. They can choose apples instead of French fries. And just having that awareness, just making those small lifestyle changes really does have this wonderful cumulative effect. So again, like I said, the walking classroom, super flexible, can be used in regular traditional classroom, out of school time, summer programs. We have had, people, we're here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. The program has been used over at Duke University with their hospital school. Sometimes it would, the kids, they're in the hospital for weeks on end. And so they could listen to these podcasts, and it was really encouraging. It was sort of like a treat for them, and it gave them a reason to get up and go walking so that they could listen to these podcasts. The program is also been used in specialty summer camps. Like we did have an autism camp that used the walking classroom, and the students loved it. They did great. The program is used regularly in self-contained classrooms, students with special needs. So it's a really, really flexible program. And like I said, the kids, they just like it. They just think it's fun. We have a ton of supplemental resources on our adopter resources page. Here we go. Hold on, let me pull this up. Okay. And so once you are an adopter, you will have access to this special secret squirrel teacher resources. And you'll be able to search for podcast resources, supplemental resources that we have either created or curated. So again, the Walking Classroom, we're a nonprofit program. What we want is for you to use the program, and we want to help you use the program as successfully as you can. So we've done a lot of the background work for you. We're not going to say, oh, for this level membership, you get this, for this. No, no, no. Once you get the Walking Classroom, you have access to all of these resources forever and ever. And half our staff is former teachers. We're eager to help. We're eager to help, facilitate implementation of the program. So anyway, you can search for the different podcasts. You can search by subject area. You can search by a themed grouping. So if you're doing, biographies or Civil War or, famous African Americans, or you can search by keyword. So we were just talking about hot springs and geysers. And so we search for geysers and that pops up, hot springs. Oh gosh. Trust me, we have lots of resources about that. But anyway, I'm just going to move on. I can send you a link to those adopter resources. My apologies. One of the ideas that you can do while you're listening with your students is to have them keep a listening journal. And the reason for that is it really does help solidify their learning. You can have them practice their summary writing, somebody wanted but so. Maybe include 2 questions of what else they would like to learn and 2 statements of what the podcast reminded them of. You can also have them practice creating thick questions, which is really just such a wonderful way to sort of build conversation skills. So instead of being like, did you like it? Have the kids think of thick questions, like what would Abraham Lincoln have done differently if, and sort of these really meaty questions that really can sort of help facilitate deeper discussions. You can also break the students into listening groups. And so, if you have an after-school program or a summer program, you can have smaller groups go for a walk with a facilitator while you stay back and work on something else, almost like a station sort of idea. You can have fun Fridays, and so students, or fun Tuesdays, whatever fun day you want. Like I said, usually students all listen to the same podcast at the same time, but you can have them choose a podcast that they want to listen to. And then when you get back to your meeting place, have them talk about what they learned and maybe, practice their persuasion skills and sort of convince the other students to listen to what they had learned. Another super fun thing to do is to have students map their walks. And this is a really fun way to practice map skills and math skills. So I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Here's my primary school. So if you go to Google Maps and you pop in the address, if you right click it, it will then say measure distance. And so what you can do is you can just click, 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 and you can set your, you can go for a walk and it measures your distance as you go. And we'll stop maybe and get a little treat on the way home. And then we can walk past the park. And then when you head back, we're not going to go to the pub, get out of there. If you go back, okay, and then let's see. So now I've hit a mile. So this is a really great way that you can help gauge distance. You can have the students do sort of like a scavenger hunt with each other. They can plan different routes. Anyway, a lot of fun that you can do with that. Okay. Okay. And the super fun thing is after the kids have used the walking classroom for a while, have them create their own podcast. And that also is when the listening journals come in handy. If you've had them keep track of more things that they'd like to learn, they can use that as a starting point. It really provides a great authentic research exercise. They can pursue something that they're interested in. There are so many free recording options on the web. So you could even do like a voice memo on the phone or, GarageBand or, any other recording program that you have. And then these audio devices, like I mentioned earlier, they're great, but they are locked. And so the podcast that the kids create, you would not be able to upload them onto these audio devices, but the teacher could share them, on her Google Classroom or on her website so that the podcast can really be enjoyed by a much broader audience. So family members, grandparents, neighbors, they'll all have access to those podcasts. All right, nitty gritty. So each of these audio devices is $125. It comes preloaded with a school year's worth of academic podcasts, standards aligned podcasts. So there's no Wi-Fi or data needed. The program is absolutely ready to go out of the box. The only thing it needs is one AAA battery. It does come with a AAA battery, and then you would need to replace that as you go along. It also comes with a set of earbuds and a lanyard, so the kids can hang those around their neck while they walk. So there's no Wi-Fi, no data needed, and it's a one-time expense. It's not a subscription based. We do have a 1-year warranty on the materials, and so it's full replacement 1 year, and then after that it's a $19.99 replacement fee from the manufacturer. That being said, we have teachers who have been using the program for 5, 6, 7 years, and these audio devices, I promise you, are so durable. Playaway, the manufacturer of these, their main customer is the U.S. military, and so these things are like designed to be knocked around, and so they're really, they can withstand middle schoolers. We also have a mobile app available if you're at a school that has a one-to-one and students all have their own devices. That might be a better option for you. I will say the great majority of our adopters use these preloaded devices. But if you were interested in the app, if you had a large, if you had a lot of students that were going to adopt it, we could talk about volume discounts for that. And otherwise it's $3.99 per device per month. ESSER funding. The walk-in classroom is such a home run for ESSER funding. Evidence-based, it's a one-time expense. We certainly address academic learning loss and absolutely provide social emotional support. We've a lot of our adopters recently have been putting their ESSER funds to use by incorporating the walking classroom. We do provide free training, and that's ongoing training. So anytime if you've got new facilitators, we would absolutely train them for free, as well as free professional development. So if there's something that you want your teachers to have, or if you have an idea about best practices, we're more than happy to work with you on that, and again, at no charge. We also meet the tier 2 of Every Student Succeed evidence-based program. So we're proud of that. Okay, teacher's guide to support the program, $150 for the print version or $100 for the electronic version. But for you, my friends, as a thank you for taking time, we will go ahead and send you a link to a free electronic teacher's guide so that you have a chance to flip through it and see if what we offer is, in line with what you're looking for, and gives you a better idea of the podcasts that are featured, and sort of the materials to support those. So again, please include your name, your first and last name, and your email in the chat so we make sure to get that to the right place, along with the professional development certificate. But in the meantime, I encourage you to please visit our website, thewalkingclassroom.org, and check out our sample educational podcasts. So those podcasts, we have 28 free podcasts. You can download those, as well as the accompanying lesson plans. So, I encourage you to maybe take a walk tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon, maybe tonight, and listen to some of those and see if, again, the walking classroom is sort of what you're looking for, if it fits your need. As a nonprofit program, we usually don't have like sales, but we are right now, as a matter of fact. We're offering free shipping, and y'all will get that free teacher's guide. But if there was another person who was interested in the program, now through the end of June, the code Use It or Lose It, knowing that certainly at this time of year, there are schools and programs that have funds that they need to use. We would include free shipping and a free teacher guide for that. So just a reminder, walking classroom is good for summer school. It's good for camps, track out, after school programs, and classrooms. Okay. And then if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and put those in the chat box. That's my information. I'm Laura Fenn, and Laura at thewalkingclassroom.org. And then that's our number at the office. That's it for my spiel, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has anything that was not addressed in the presentation or through the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself and we can have a conversation, or if you'd rather put your question in the chat, we can do that too. When are the podcasts updated? Okay, so they're not, and that's actually, none of the podcasts are topical. So the podcasts are about, the biographies are about people, historical figures who have passed along a long time ago. It's about historical events. The science, it's about like currents and tides and things like that. Nothing is really topical. What we do update are the resources that support the podcasts, but actually the feedback that we've received from teachers is that they appreciate that there's not all of these new podcasts, that sort of replace the ones. So the materials that you have, once you become familiar with it, and then the next year you use it even more, and then the next year you use it even more. So the podcasts themselves are not updated, but the resources to support them are updated. So I hope that helps.
Laura, we did have a question from someone about how do you weave SEL into lessons like the Boston Massacre?
Sure. So that's Deborah. She's our executive director. She's excellent. Hi, Deborah. So for social emotional learning for things like the Boston Massacre, I don't know offhand what that topic is, but perhaps it might have been something like integrity or bravery or something like that. Sometimes it's sometimes there's an obvious correlation, sometimes it's not so obvious, and there's sort of a different pivot. But I promise you, there's no political bent to the podcast. There's no religious undertone. It's very sort of middle of the road. But it certainly is a thoughtful, we've been around for 11 years now, and we haven't had any pushback about the format of the podcast or the content of the podcasts. So it's really, it's thoughtful, but it's not, it's nothing to worry about. I don't know if that answered the question or not. I'm sorry. I don't know exactly what what the social emotional learning topic was on that. I can look.
Yeah, and Laura, I just thought I would mention with regard to the additional resources that are available for each podcast. We have video clips that relate specifically to the topics. We have downloadable worksheets and virtual field trip links and suggested hands-on activities, all kinds of things that we have used college interns to shamelessly curate for us and make sure that they're up to date all the time. So all sort of geared towards, making a really robust lesson possible for everyone.
100%. Thank you. Yes. And I'm sorry, my log on was not working. I don't know what happened, but I encourage you to poke around guests who are here with us. It's very extensive. We've provided a lot of resources, and like Deborah said, to help really tap into the different learning styles. So, the walking and listening might not be great for some kids, but if they have a short video to look at ahead of time, that just helps set the seed so that when they do walk, they're able to attach more information to it. Okay, is there a fee for adopter if you use the app? So the adopter, it's just to purchase the audio device is $125 for the per audio device, and then the app is $399 per month. So that just depends what suits your organization best. So if you have a one-to-one organization where each kid has their own device, an app might be a more economical resource for you. But if it's easier and you'd like the students to just have the device where the only thing they can do is sort of, work from the device, then the Walk It might be a better option for you. But there's no additional fee. It's just to purchase the device and then it's yours. And then all the training and everything is free. Okay, so are there podcasts for each core subject? So the podcasts we have, there are science podcasts, there's social studies podcasts, biographies, language arts. So those are the main 4 areas. And actually in the follow-up email, we will go ahead and send you a list of the podcast topics that also contains the health literacy messages as well as the social emotional learning. Do you have parents that use the app for learning at home? We do. So, and feel free, and especially for summer learning, I would encourage you can download it from the Apple Store or from Google Play. And 100% you can use it, as you will. And with the app, you get access to the teacher guide as well. So I would wholeheartedly encourage you, if you're a homeschooler or just, some additional enrichment for your kids while they're at home this summer, that's a great option.
So Laura, I saw on the website that it said that you do have some donated supplies that you can apply for. How does that work?
Yes, let me talk about that. So as a nonprofit program, we are eager to help get materials to people as much as possible. And so if there's a school that wants the materials, but they just don't have the resources available, you can apply for donated materials. And The only reason I didn't point that out is at this point, we don't have any funding available to help get those materials, and our wait list is quite long. That being said, once we manage expectations, who knows, maybe Daddy Warbucks will come in and, just shower us with all of this money that we can sort of donate materials. But if you're a teacher who's interested in getting the materials, I would wholeheartedly encourage you to fill out the application. It's a very short application, might take you 20 minutes. And then, again, our wait list is we have several hundred teachers on the wait list right now. And some of them have been on the wait list a long time. And that's just a function of we just don't have funding available at this point, which is an unfortunate reality, but doesn't mean that it won't happen, right? So I would encourage you to go ahead and fill out a donation, but just understand that it might be a while, if ever. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for this.
Sure. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming by. So one of the questions is, does it go up to high school? So we do have some high school programs that use it more of as a remediation, but it really sort of our sweet spot is, upper elementary and middle school. That being said, I enjoy listening to it when I go for a walk, and I learn something new each time. But I think by the time you get to high school, the classes are much more targeted, and so the walking classroom might be just a little too general for that, just because it does cover so many different subject areas. It might not be as targeted as you might be looking for. But like I said, we do have some remediation programs in high schools that use it. That being said, you could also make your own podcast for your high school kids. They would love that, or have them make podcasts for each other. Yep, Natalie points out that walking classroom has been used by students working toward GED. That's true. Thanks, Natalie. So the question is, could you use it with second grade? I would advise against that. I think that third grade is probably the lowest that you want to go, just for safety reasons, because while the kids are walking, they do have, their earbuds in. The beginning of each podcast reminds kids to only cover one ear, use one earbud, so that the other ear, they can maintain an awareness of their surroundings. And so for second grade and under, like, they can barely walk, right? Like they skip or hop or jump. So I think that the walking classroom would be too much going on for them. And I certainly wouldn't want to deny them the opportunity to hop, skip, and jump around. They need to do that. And I think by the time, third grade is a little bit young, fourth grade, it's great. And, like third grade to eighth grade is fine, but I would advise against second grade or lower. Okay. I think that might be it. Teachers, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. I wish you well. Stay happy, stay healthy. Thank you for all that you do.